One is knowing your strength, and in some cases, folks just they don't come from a world of spreadsheets and numbers, and you may have to find a partner or a teammate in order to address that.
Like what's like the first, so there's four. Okay, so we have a method to our madness here. Jeremiah jammed on us a little bit. We're like, what are the four basic mistakes that new investors make? And having said all that, our students don't make those mistakes because, well, they're working with us. However, we have in the process of working with students, we've seen people, well, not work with us and not follow our process. And so we want to kind of talk about the things that investors make that maybe aren't working with an experienced syndicator like Jeremy, for example, and some of the mistakes they make. So, what do you think is like the first mistake that you see new investors make?
For me, the some of the most common mistakes, when I see folks starting is really diving in and getting a fundamental knowledge across the spectrum. In reality, with syndication, we're starting a business, and in order to do that, we have to really understand a wider breadth of things than what we probably are used to in the past. So whether it's finding the deals, whether it's raising capital, whether it's just understanding all the lingo and the language of all of the documents we're going to look at. And I mean, documents, coming from brokers and all the other aspects, and then being able to analyze deals. If you're not, before you weren't used to spreadsheets very much, and now you're going to start looking at some pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, so you mentioned a lot of things that kind of go into deal making, deal analysis, and deal flow, and things of that nature. What would you say is kind of like one of the first mistakes that people make?
it, to me, it's not getting going fast enough and realizing you need to learn this stuff, and you need to stay on pace with the learning process, and you can start to slow down and not necessarily want to keep going with the process.
Yeah, so one of the things that, and I agree with you, not getting going early enough is not really what I call being deal ready. Being deal ready is one of those things where they're not even prepared to talk to brokers and investors. Like, talk about what kind of we show our, the mistakes people make not being deal ready, and at the same time kind of what we teach our students to become a more deal ready.
Yeah, being deal ready, it is kind of that language, being able to understand the process of handling a deal when it comes to you. Those are some of the foundational things that you have to have. Um, the it's an interesting process watching people pick up on the language and all of the dialect, the acronyms and that sort of thing, that are necessary to become truly deal ready.
Yeah, and the other thing that people mistake is that they don't really have sufficient knowledge about being deal ready. So when they talk to brokers, they're not using language. They're not using insider language like cap rate or value add or reposition. They're using, well, newbie language. And that doesn't go well when talking to brokers. And also, a lot of new students are they don't have the track record, which is why they're new students. And so the way they're calling brokers, and the brokers ask them, "Hey, what's your track record?" And they're like, "Well, I don't have any." And so the broker was like, "You know what? I'll tell you what, Sam. Why don't you send me your resume and a proof of funds, and I'll send you some deals." And of course, students are stuck with that. And what is the solution to this not being taken seriously by brokers?
Yeah, so in reality, you need to start to build a team, right? You got to cover all of those aspects of this new business, whether it's the property management folks, because you haven't managed properties, maybe you self-managed a couple small properties, but you're going to get much bigger when you start to deal with multifamily. You need to have a much broader reach with your team. You're going to need different brokers than anything you've done in any mortgage activity before. So you're going to, I'd say brokers, but I really mean kind of from a lending side brokers. You may need to have different types of financing options depending on the properties you're looking at. So you really need to build out that team with lots of key people that will bring all of those knowledge bases to you at your disposal, depending on which ones you have to actually call up at any given time for a specific property.
Yeah, imagine calling a broker and you're using insider language because you got some education, and you're also now, instead of, hey, what have you done? What's your track record? Now you're saying, hey, you know what? I'm working with Frank. He manages 3,000 units, and I have lender XYZ who's underwritten $1 billion worth of deals, and I have an SEC attorney. Now the conversation shifts from your lack of track record to your team's track record. And what broker is going to try to doubt you and ask you for proof of funds when you have this major team built and they're not? Instead, what they're going to do, they're like, "Ooh, he's a or she's a player, right? How else could they have recruited such an amazing team?" And they're going to take you seriously. And that's how we overcome this lack of experience with some education and building a team.
Yep. And I think it's really key to understand that, when we bring students into the program, we bring them through all of those facets, all kind of simultaneously inching forward in that knowledge base. And really they get to grow. And there is some really interesting things that happen. When you first talk, the acronyms and things are a little foreign, but after several months, it really becomes interesting because you'll be on a call and you can just tell that they've changed their conversation with you. And those acronyms are now just part of the conversation when we're talking through particular deals that we're reviewing.
It makes all the difference. It's a little change, and it's not, education doesn't take very long, and building your team doesn't take very long. And so people always think, I need to build up 5 or 10 years of real estate investing experience. Let me flip some houses or build rental properties to get the experience, and that's cool, but it's not necessary. Like we can get you there in probably 30, 60 days. We can kind of get you deal ready, and that's really a very important part of being released, like I say, into the wild, so you don't sound like a newbie. Now, the next challenge is really around is deal flow. What do you see some of the challenges happening around? Because you need deals and capital. A deal and capital, those are very important things. What are you seeing some mistakes being made around deal flow?
Being afraid to talk to the brokers and establishing some relationships and even just getting signed up, for the deals that just come through naturally if you just subscribe to the mailing list for the brokers that are in the market that you decide on. Though just making those fundamental steps will start to put you on a list and start a timeline. Then when you get down the road, one of two things will happen. When you call, a broker, a particular brokerage company that you've been registered with, they'll have you on record as being in their system for a certain period of time. So starting as quickly as possible kind of seasons you in their database. And then when you start calling them, and you're talking to them, they're going to recognize who you are as you have that conversation. And the longer that you're with them, I'll call it the relationship builds, and they really do feel a little bit of an obligation that you've been sticking it out with them for 6 months, 12 months, maybe a year and a half on any given broker, maybe 3 to 5 years before you do a deal with them. But that relationship is building, and those are important steps for them to recognize you, and having some communication, quarterly at a minimum, if not monthly. And when we're really getting going and we're looking in a market actively pursuing deals, it could be weekly that we're having discussions as we're evaluating those deals and providing feedback.
Yeah, off-market deals. What percentage do you think off-market deals are happening versus on-market deals?
I think if you're doing property in your own backyard, you're probably going to see significantly higher ratios of deals that are off market, truly off market. If you're dealing in other markets, it's a little bit harder to get those off market deals, but you certainly have to establish that relationship with the broker before they're going to, count you into the circle for off market deals before they send them to the masses.
Yeah, one of the mistakes that people make is coming from a real estate, single family house investing world, is they think they can find apartments on the MLS, or they hear about LoopNet, the magical source of all deals, where the truth is that it's kind of where deals go to die. And what Jeremy is talking about here is that he kind of glossed over this common mistake, which is those things. And the solution is to build a relationship with brokers. So, I grew up in the house flipping world, and, it was all about sending postcards, putting up bandit signs, MLS, building relationship with wholesalers and brokers. And none of those things transferred to apartment investing. It staggered me. Like, man, all this stuff I've learned over 3 to 4 years didn't transfer at all to apartment. It's like a totally different game. And so,
Yeah.
if you're getting an apartment investor, the magic, as is what Jeremy's describing, is it really happens with building relationship with brokers. That's the key.
Yeah, and if you want to build, if you want to do off-market deals and it's in your backyard, you really do have to build the very same relationship with the owners, but that's much more cumbersome because brokers have access to many, many, many sellers, or potential sellers down the road. So you can use one conduit to get to them versus having to go establish all those relationships with all those sellers.
Yeah, it's way too tedious. And so I did try this for a time. I sent yellow letters to apartment owners in Texas. I think this was back in, gosh, 2006. I think it was. And what I found is a lot of them are LLCs. There's multiple owners. There's gatekeepers, and it never gets to them. And by the way, even if it did get to them, they're not going to sell it for all cash, fast close. Okay, they're not. What are they going to do? They're going to call their broker. You know.
That's very true. I get those very same calls and I get those very same letters.
Yeah. Do you ever
To me
call them?
as
Like,
an
no,
owner
you
of a
can call your
property.
brokers because these are all tire kickers. So it's funny. It's like you learn all this stuff in a single family house space and it doesn't transfer very neatly to the apartment investing space, which is kind of odd. The other thing, other mistake I see people make, this is back to deal flow, Jeremy, is they pick a market that's too small, right? So, if it's a numbers game. So if you want to analyze 3, 4, 5 deals a week and you pick a market that's too small, you're not going to get those number of deals just by matter of practicality.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And some markets may, literally see one property sell every 3 to 6 months, especially if it's in a market that has a lot of long-term hold. You need to be kind of conscious of that. If it's held by, and I'll call it long-term investors, and they just hold it for 10 to 20 years, that's different than a much larger market where there's a lot of, whether it's syndicators or other investors that are doing value add, and those properties transact much more frequently.
Yeah, exactly. So just pick a market that's big enough to sustain your deal flow. And if you happen to be in a smaller market, like for example, we love Huntsville, a great market, but man, we'll be lucky if we do a deal a year. So we can't build a business around that. If you need to analyze 3, 4, 5 deals a week, which you should, then pick a large enough market, or you can pick 2 smaller markets. That'll work as well. So these are some of the mistakes that we see. Deal flow is critical, as you know. It's a numbers game. Anyone come from the single family house investing space, it's a numbers game. Got to make offers, make offers, make offers. I'll get on the phone, get on the phone. And to some degree, I like to say it's the same thing but different in the multifamily space. So deal flow, establishing deal flow is obviously a critical pillar of getting a deal done, obviously. But there's another one related to, and that is deal analysis. Now, deal analysis is a problem for single family house investing as well, because, for example, if you're flipping houses, well, you surely need to know the ARV after pair value, because if you get that wrong, shoot, it's not gonna go well. You better get your construction costs right, otherwise, it's not gonna go well for you. Now, even a rental property, that's cool. You need to know both of those things and market rents. What are some of the mistakes you see people make on analyzing apartment deals?
I think one is knowing your strength, and in some cases, folks just they don't come from a world of spreadsheets and numbers, and you may have to find a partner or a teammate in order to address that. In other cases, it can be just figuring out and learning what the fundamental inputs are, right? If you haven't done this before, you don't know what your baseline is. You don't necessarily know what expenses from landscaping or things like that, or how to determine whether what the broker gives you in their information set is relevant and valid for what you're trying to input. Because it's a classic story problem when you get an offering memorandum and there's a lot of information that you don't need. There's a lot of information you may not know whether it's true or not. And in some cases, you have to figure out, because that could be the value in the property. Maybe the owner really is spending that kind of money on those expenses, and in reality, they shouldn't be. Those are some hidden opportunities for those deals. But over time, and with kind of starting with a standard process of looking at the deals, you can figure that out and start to figure out how to make the right assessment to identify the deal that you're going to go after at the right price point based on those really key knowledge parts.
Yeah, some people sometimes tell me that, oh, it's too complicated to underwrite apartment building deals. But honestly, it's not any more complicated than single family houses. At the end of the day, you need a good financial model. In our world, we use a syndicated deal analyzer. That's the most widely used underwriting tool for, and its cool thing is you can do very simple analysis very quickly, but allows you to do very advanced analysis. And so you can solve that. You need a good financial model. A lot of people just think, oh, I don't have a financial model. Well, go get one, right? It's very affordable. You can get it. But then the other problem that you mentioned, Jeremy, is the numbers you put in the Excel spreadsheet, right? Because I can make my spreadsheet say anything I want. The key is, what numbers am I putting in? What am I basing that on? Right.
Yeah.
So people will go online and do some online research or rules of thumb, but they can make big mistakes if they go at that way. So how do we advise our students to go about it?
Yeah, this is, I'll call it, we have rules of thumb, but they're national kind of starting points. But in reality, we need to learn about our specific markets. There's different insurance rates in different areas of the country, and folks that may own a vacation rental property or something like that in Florida, have been devastated with the insurance increases. Well, those happen on multifamily properties too. So you need to understand what those critical expenses are by the area that your market is in. And when you start doing reviews of different properties in that market, you certainly get acclimated to those specific numbers that you need to know. In different asset classes will have different numbers. So the experience that you can gain, the experience you get to leverage with mentors, and the experience with other investors or syndicators, through the platform, will also provide you great places to get that key information for underwriting solidly.
Well, you're talking about the team we built in the deal ready step. You mentioned mentors and your team, right? You got to lean on someone who's more experienced than you are, number one, but also lean on your property manager, right? If
Mhm.
you're doing rent projections or expenses, well, they know the local market. What about your lender, right? Lean on your lender about what kind of terms you can expect from your interest rate, and you put all that in the spreadsheet, right? And now you have numbers that are actually based in reality. And so by leveraging your team, some kind of experienced advisor, your property manager, your lender, now you're not just making assumptions. You're not going on the rentometer for the rents just, and you're not using just national rule of thumb. You're actually using local expertise from your team. And this is why building the team in step one is so important, because without it, you're just guessing. And as a result, people make a lot of big mistakes in the analysis. So it's one of those things where analysis is actually not nearly as hard as it is once you have a good financial model. Almost anybody can enter the numbers in. You just got to make sure that you put the right numbers in it and leverage your team. So
Yep.
that's a really good point. So really appreciate you all hanging out with here this evening, and we'll catch you next month on the next webinar. Good night, all.